So welcome everyone to the JB Media Digital Drop-In today. I'm so happy to have all of you joining me as usual from around the country. And I'm especially glad to have our guest of honor today, Bob Peck. I want to kick us off just by sharing a little bit of information about what we're going to talk about today and who we are at the JB Media Institute. And so again, the topic for today is how to produce and promote video content that creates real impact. And the reason I really wanted to talk about this subject, especially with somebody that I know is as talented as Bob, is because there is so much video in the world. It's everywhere. It's literally everywhere in my life. Every nook and cranny of my life, I am using video for different things. And so how do we really create content that is going to stand out, really connect with people? Now, I am hoping when I do this, you'll be able to hear. So let me know if you can't hear. But what I wanted to start with today, just for a quick minute, is to show you a video that Bob created for our DIY tourism conference.
One of the things that I get out of the DIY tourism marketing conference is the ability to receive really practical information and also share information with your peers. Find out what works and what hasn't worked.
Because the conference is intimate, you get the chance to chat with people directly and hear what they're working on, and they get to hear from you about how your technology, your service might be able to help them achieve those goals.
I think the most valuable thing we offer at the DIY Tourism Conference is kind of a constellation of all the best practices and nuggets of actionable best practices that people can take back and use in their plans either immediately or as they're planning for next year.
Historically, I think it's that intersection of making sure that the diverse community is fully engaged with the projects that you're bringing to your local towns and cities.
So just making sure, to me, that you get training, but also that you invite people in for real and give them real power, share your power.
One of the things I got out of this conference is the fact that we should approach part of tourism from a community perspective.
So all of these things are basically just going to allow us to have more freedom, I think, rather than having to call a graphic designer every time we want to do something. The number one thing I love about this conference is the feeling of family and friendship. There are people that I respect, there are people in the industry that I think are doing amazing things, and incredible creativity and a total devotion to building community. So thank you for letting me share that. Because for me, I wanted to show that the proof of what we're going to talk about today was some of the recommendations that Bob is going to make is in the pudding of the work that he does. Because after 8 years of doing our conference, this video for me is the first time we've really ever had somebody capture what the conference is really like. So I just wanted to give you a big shout out, Bob, because the things that you have taught me and that you shared with people at the conference in your class there, I feel like you've really put so much into listening to your clients, to connecting with them, for understanding their goals, and then developing something that I feel like really, really nails it, across the board. So again, if you just joined, you can check this out again in the slide deck when I share it. But it's a great example, I think, of the principles we're going to talk about today directly in action.
Yeah, I just want to just interject real quickly just on that as a sponsor of the DIY conference, and also working in the time to shoot the video, and also just to take in all the courses and everything. It was just an honor to do those three aspects of the conference, and trying to fit that all in. So.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it because I feel like you really created something. I mean, you captured our sponsors, our founders, you captured our attendees. Like, you did a really great job of listening to us, understanding what we needed, and also really getting to know our audience while you were there, creating something that I think also gets them really excited. So again, for those of you who just joined, I was just introducing Bob Peck, who's our guest speaker today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Benoit. I'm the co-founder and lead instructor of the JB Media Institute. We will be providing the recording and the slide deck. We usually send that out late Thursday or early Friday. So you don't have to remember everything today. You'll get a copy of this information. And at the very beginning is some information about Bob and I, as well as my contact information and information about our programs. One thing I wanted to highlight today is I am starting a new AI leadership lunch and learn that's going to go for the rest of the year once a month about demystifying AI ethics. And when you get your recording and your slide deck, there'll be a code on that page that if you want to come to some of those sessions for free, that you can attend for free. So again, I notice people are already popping stuff in the Q&A, so thank you for doing that. You're ahead of the game. Essentially, we will be answering questions as we go along. I'll be monitoring the Q&A feature. You can also put things in the chat if you need to, but the Q&A will help us stay a little bit more organized. And again, I know we've had some people joining at the top of the hour, so I just want to say welcome to Bob from Mountain Water Films. We're super glad to have you here. I feel like we have had an amazing time collaborating the last few months, and not just collaborating on work, but I've been learning from you as well. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation today. And I want to just give you a second to introduce yourself and to kick us off with this first point that you wanted to make.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And again, I appreciate everything that you do. I mean, your wealth of knowledge and how you freely share it with everybody is just so, such a great resource in our community locally, and just kind of in the space of what the area of your expertise and that you teach everybody. And I also want to thank everybody here for joining us too. It's great to have everyone on here. It sounds like a really diverse crowd from a lot of different places. And I wasn't sure when putting this together, like the skill level of everybody. So I was trying to tailor this in a way that anyone that's a beginner that's trying to get into this sort of field, all the way up to people that are experts, maybe they can learn a thing or two today. So I'm really just, glad to be a part of this. And I'll just jump right into my first slide. The one takeaway I just want everyone to leave today is to just start with, why do you do this? I mean, why do you produce video? Why do you make this? And this is Start with Why is really the title of a book from one of my favorite books that I've read from Simon Sinek. And if you haven't read it, then I highly recommend it. It really changed the way that I feel about how I approach producing videos. And really, it's really about, there's three aspects. There's like a golden circle, and it's like the why, the how, and the what. And one thing I've learned over the years is that most people, when they produce videos, they kind of lead with their hows, or their like, how do we do this? And like, what do we do? Like, here's what we do. But, I think the one takeaway that I encourage everyone here is to just kind of start with that why, and just figure out whether it's your client or yourself producing something, really just lean into that why. And, the quote that is from that book is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and add, Simon did an amazing TED Talk years ago about this topic that was really, really popular. So it's easy to find on Google if you want to take a look at it. But the book is amazing. I feel like the book really changed my life. I've been teaching it as part of what I teach for a really long time. So this next thing I wanted to talk about, Bob, I was really glad that you brought up the idea of education and entertaining, because this is, again, something that I've repeatedly talked about when we're coming up with what kind of content do we want to create? So how do you perceive these two things when it comes to figuring out how to make the right content or choose the right topics?
Yeah, I feel like in this day and age, I really feel like there's just two pillars that, when you produce videos, it kind of falls into two categories, and I think they could be interchangeable, like they can be combined. But really, I think that the two main pillars of video, or just content creation, is to either educate your audience or to entertain your audience. I mean, think about when you go on YouTube, you're either going on there to find an answer to something, or you're going on to watch something to be entertained, and, I think the best approach, if you can, is to kind of intertwine both of those aspects into what you're producing.
Yeah, I love this because I think a lot of times when we're doing business, the idea of entertaining people seems a little outside of the box, right? Like, I know a lot of clients, when we're ideating around content, it's like, it's easy to get into this idea where I want to educate people about what I do. But then when we say like, well, we want to entertain people, that feels more scary somehow, or like more difficult to come up with. But I really want to encourage people to have some fun with your video. Like, tell some
Yeah,
stories that aren't just about the products and services. Give your brand some personality. Do you feel like that's kind of aligned with what you're saying?
absolutely. That's what I was going to say, just staying on brand. And it's a good way to just show like who you are as a company, or as a content creator or an influencer, just showing your personality and interjecting that whenever you can. And also educating, it doesn't have to be silly. It doesn't have to be, like I said, just keeping that brand, with that in mind. You could do both. And I think the most engaging videos to me are the ones where you can do both.
Yeah, I want to say too that promotionally speaking, if we're just talking about how to get more attention to your video as well, I think this is really key, because a lot of times, again, I feel like in the business world, in the professional world, sometimes there's this idea that like if we're having too much fun, we're not being professional. But I'm like, at this point in the game, the truth is, any content that you create that is more entertaining and fun and just engages people in the story, that is actually going to help any content that you have to put out later that maybe isn't as flashy or as cool. So like in social media, for instance, if I can use some content that's more entertaining and storytelling oriented to get engagement to go up, to get my reach to go up, then I have a better chance of the more sort of longer form or educational or utilitarian content to actually get attention. So they really work together. I try to remind people like marketing should be fun. It should be really fun. And so figure out, like I said, like where your brand stands on that. What is fun for your brand? What like level of comfort do you have with kind of, like I said, opening up and creating more personality? Or sometimes I call this flavor, right? Like I want more flavor to things. I don't want anything to be bland. And Kathy, yeah, I mean, there is a third E that would be engaged, because you often want to be inspired and take some kind of action. But I think Bob and I would agree engagement should be in everything. I don't think that's a separate E. I think that it's like entertainment should be engaging, education should be engaging at this point because of the nature of the world, right? So I feel like engagement becomes something that's a consideration in every piece of content we make.
Sure. And maybe you're catching on to the theme here. That was the two pillars, and here's the three eyes. But maybe I was trying to keep the two, like, because I had the three eyes here, so I was just, So anyway,
I do think that engagement, it like I said, regardless of why you're doing your video or what kind of video you're doing, I feel like the engagement piece is really important. Like people have to want it. You have to be solving a problem, or filling a need, or connecting with things that people want.
Yeah, and I think maybe the engage is just understood. I mean, it's just, intrinsic in everything you should do. It should have that in mind. You want to engage your audience. You don't want people to tune out after the first minute or 30 seconds or whatever. So
yeah, or 3 seconds or 10 seconds if we're talking social media. So
right.
it's competitive. But yeah, so let's talk about the three eyes and how you're applying this when it comes to, concepting your videos and producing them.
Yeah, and I've given this a lot of thought over the years, and this is something that I've kind of whittled down to just kind of three categories that I think the videos I produce anyway, and I'm kind of thinking maybe across the board it could be. I mean, but in the categories that I've found is that the videos that I produce kind of fall into these three categories. There's the videos that inform, that could be, just sometimes there's people that just, need to know, we need to get our message out, we need to just get the word out about what we're doing, what we're about, things like that. I'm being really quick here because I know we have a lot to go through. And then there's the videos that influence, and if you think about anytime you turn on the TV and you see the commercial break, I mean, those are basically videos, or, the category of influence is basically just sales, it's advertising, and, we're selling our product, and that's sort of like the purpose of that video is to influence a buying decision, let's say. And then my favorite is the kind of third category is inspire, and that's more going back to that why, when you can really show your why and you can inspire people. To me, that just has a lot more impact than maybe the first two categories. Not that there's anything wrong with trying to sell things and like trying to, get the word out.
Yeah, I love this concept because, again, from the promotional standpoint, where I've been promoting content for so many years, I basically feel like this is really about like the goal of the content, right? So like,
Sure.
Yes, sort of the broader goal is, are we educating people and entertaining them? Hopefully we're doing both, right? And it's creating engagement. But I think this is where we dive a little bit more into like the goal of the content we're creating. So exactly what you said. Do we need to show somebody how to use a product? Do we need to give them some really clear information about our background and what we do and why we're an expert? Do we need to, just like give them the meat of why they would choose us? Or are we really ready to like sell to them, right? Which is that influence piece, because I think that's why we call the folks out there that help us sell things to their networks influencers, right? Because they've already built up the trust, and we're kind of hiring them to help build trust with an audience that maybe hasn't met us yet or doesn't know a lot about us. And I think all of us have to do stuff that is really like not just a sales agenda. It's not just a marketing agenda. It's about being connective. And that's where I see the inspiration is really important. And it's funny because in content marketing, I teach something called the 30-30-30 rule. And I really talk about how like 30% of your content is that direct sell influence content, right? It's like, here's what we're selling, buy it now, right? It's the clear call to action. It's the transactional intention that we have behind what we're doing. But then I feel like there's like two other buckets of content that aren't a direct sell, that are more about informing people about things and telling some like really clear, helpful, useful stories that people need. And then there's a whole bucket of content where I'm like, stop worrying about money and users and getting people to be a customer, and just tell them, what you care about and connect with them as a brand, as a business, or as an organization. So I think that really like connects, right, to that kind of perspective of just like, how do we get content to really win?
Yeah, and you really hit on something earlier. I just want to bring up in this what you just said. Purpose and intentionality. If you're all right, so you have a video in mind that you want to produce, let's just assume maybe, you have a client, or maybe it's for yourself, the first thing you should think about is, what is the intention? What's the purpose of this? Having a goal in mind, what does success look like with this video? Like, why am I producing this? And that's why I think in these three categories, they kind of fit, like maybe the goal is to, let people know more about my brand or what we do. And then maybe more is like, the purpose could be, hey, we have this one product, or we have this promotion that we really want to, let people know, so there's always start with kind of like the end in mind, and like work, maybe reverse engineer it, but just having a purpose is like super important, and having that intention when you're thinking about producing something.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I really appreciate you saying that, because there's been so many times when I've worked with clients where they've had videos done, and I'm like, well, what was the purpose of the video? What's going to make you feel like it was successful, right? And worth the investment that you made? And it's like, they never asked that question before they started.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, so let's reverse engineer that. Let's make sure when we hire a videographer, or we start to put video more into our workflow, even as DIYers, like really making sure that we know why we're doing it, who we're doing it for, and then really kind of plotting that out. I mean, I think this is why so many professional video people storyboard, right? Because that storyboarding process actually helps you highlight that.
And this is also kind of ties into like the other part of this. The title of our presentation is to produce and promote. Obviously you can have the tools to make an awesome video, but if you don't have the capability to promote it to its highest expectations, and that's where a lot of the stuff that what your knowledge is, that you really help people drill down into help promote something after it's created. Otherwise it's just going to sit on YouTube with 13 views and wonder why you didn't have a successful campaign, and why did you make that investment to begin with.
Yeah. So this, I want to talk a little bit about the technical end of things, which I'm really excited to hear your thoughts and expertise on this. I do want to encourage everyone, for those of us that are doing some social media video on our own, and we're doing maybe some video, like educational videos on our own, we're doing stuff for our websites, our email newsletters. I mean, I just cannot say enough how important it is to talk to the experts. And to really learn that there are like key ways to make your sound, your light, your composition, and your intention stronger. And when you are clear on all that stuff, even when you're doing it yourself, you're going to get a better product and it's going to be received better. Because I feel like over the last 15 years, I was lucky enough to have video people who taught amazing classes and allowed me to learn a little bit more about just even how to use my phone better. So how do you kind of approach these four elements, and what kind of tips do you have for folks to, especially who are working on some content on their own?
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, I've been doing this for for a long time. I started in audio production back in 2001 as an audio engineer, working at a voiceover production studio. So obviously, that muscle for me is just like the muscle memory of sound is just like second nature to me. And I, sometimes I just take for granted that maybe that's an obstacle that some people have a hard time dealing with when producing video. And again, all four of these elements take a lot of practice. And, sometimes will get in the way of, hey, I got to worry about sound. I got to worry about lighting. I got to worry about all this stuff. But like, obviously, you got to focus on the message too. Like why, back to the production and just having that all in mind. So obviously the more comfortable you can get with having clean audio and like having great lighting and composition and all that is key to having, once you can like master that stuff, it really helps to kind of focus more on the content you're producing. And I just encourage people to, just whether it is just practicing, having good sound and, having a decent microphone or a lavalier mic that picks up sound rather than just like obviously the onboard mic that's on your phone or on a camera, setting up for an interview or having someone kind of near a window where you've got natural light coming in rather than being in a dark corner of a room. I mean, these little tiny things make a huge difference when when you're producing things. And obviously composition, there's obviously the rule of thirds that everybody's aware of, but there's also another third I like to think is that there's the three kind of things that you're shooting is people, places, and things, right? I mean, what else is there to really shoot? And so having different aspects of that, you have your wide shots, you have your mid shots and your tight shots, and when to get those shots and when to work them into your video. Those are all key moments that help tell that story, and everything's about being intentional, using all these tools to your, helps really set that whole video project up. And it just really can differentiate between having something that looks really good and helps tell that story as opposed to just, throwing things together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll throw out that one of the things, and feel free to disagree. I mean, it's because I feel like you have your finger on the pulse of this stuff a little bit more. But one of the things I learned over the years is I think, first of all, you're just going to get better the more you do it. So you really do have to see it as like a constant improvement on these elements, right? Like sometimes you're doing something that is new. So the first few times you do it, it's not perfect. And even building in time to your schedule to like test your room, test your sound, listen to it before you're recording. So like if there are issues, what they are, right? And just being aware that like, okay, we might not be perfect in the beginning, but the more we do it, the better we're going to get. The more we do it, the more connections that we make, the more responses we get, the more we might be able to invest in better equipment or take some classes or understand something more. So I think a lot of the people and brands that are really successful online, especially small to medium-sized businesses or organizations, if you look at their videos from 5 years ago, they're not as cool as their videos are now. And I think like the market is open to that, right? To like improving, trying, and not having that pressure. I also think too that, so over the years, one of the things that I've really learned about just doing your own video for social media and things like that is, when people can't hear you, you really truly are losing them. So like, I would almost say you could sacrifice other things before you sacrifice the sound. Like, because especially in the world of social media and things like that, people are actually used to seeing a mixture of professional content with sort of more do-it-yourself DIY style content. So as long as they can hear the message, that's what matters. You can always improve upon the visuals. Do you agree with that? Do you feel
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the old sayings that people, people can forgive bad video when they're watching something. I mean, whether something's out of focus or maybe the white balance isn't clear or whatever, but they can't forgive bad audio. That's key to have, if the audio is bad, someone's gonna either tune out or like turn it off anyway because they just can't take it.
Yeah. And so it's like, that's a really important piece, is to kind of prioritize the elements as well. Like, I think as you go along, you get better at lighting naturally just from looking at your own content, composition as well. And like I said, the better you get at these technical skills, the more fun you're going to have. I think that's a great point. Like the
Oh,
more
yeah.
you're going to be able to focus on the goal and the message.
And I'm still learning. I mean, I'll admit, I've been doing this, like I said, for, a long time, and I'm still learning along the way. I mean, you learn little lessons along the way at each shoot. There's like, okay, I know not to do that anymore. Maybe, maybe the light and lighting is tricky. It's one of those things where how do you set it up just right to where you're not getting weird shadows on people's faces and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of like, full-on productions have a dedicated light guy, and a dedicated sound guy, but my whole style over the years has just been more of a run and gun, and especially from like getting my start in weddings. And and speaking of, I go back and look at some of the videos I've shot over like 10 years ago, and I'm like, I cringe because it's like, wow, I actually did that, and like that's a thing. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's true about all creative skills, right? The more you build that muscle, the stronger it gets. And so we don't need to just be super harsh judges of ourselves. We do have one question. I'm sorry, I can't see whose name it's attached to, but feel free to chat in. But the question is, do we have suggestions on how to store and share footage with other people? Like if we're working with a partner or a helper to create video content, they would just love some advice about how to do that. I will just say for me, because I'm a layperson, I still use Google Drive. And hey, Anna, great, that was you. I still use Google Drive for a lot of my video stuff that I'm sharing with other team members and clients. The only thing is, it didn't take me long to have to start paying for Google Drive because video takes up a lot of space. So do you have suggestions about like how you're storing video and then maybe like sharing it with clients and things like that?
Yeah, so when I produce something and before I share them the final videos, I post it on my Frame.io, which is a Adobe program. It's a platform from Adobe, and it's really just an easy way to upload a video, share the link, get feedback. The clients can like write comments in the player, like at that exact part of the video that they want to have changed. And to me, that experience has been really helpful, and it's not expensive at all for like a yearly annual subscription. It's really affordable, and to me, it's just really changed my when I started using that a couple of years ago, just getting feedback from clients, rather than just getting an email with like a bunch of like bullet points. Hey, can you fix this or this or this? Having the comments on the player has just been a game changer for me. So I recommend Frame.io to check that out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because again, it's funny, the kind of video that I do. So let's say I build a website for a client. Usually I make a series of videos so that they can go and watch how to edit their website after the fact, right? And so for me, I don't need their feedback on the video, right? I just need to share it with them. So I think that's an important distinction for Anna. If you're working with somebody where you want them to feedback on the content and help you make changes, or you're going to be giving feedback to them, then I think Bob nailed it. You need a system that makes it really easy to make that feedback followable and implementable.
Yeah, and I also think you could put raw footage on like a timeline and export it out and share that with clients, and that way they could say if it's like, hey, I'm not sure if I like this soundbite or this soundbite, give them the whole thing on Frame.io and let them comment, so it doesn't have to just be a produced video. It can be like raw footage that you just kind of export out, and that way you know what the footage is, and that way they know what they want. Anything that can elevate the client experience like that is just
Yeah, and I think Anna too is talking about like working with somebody who's helping her now with video content. So it'd be more like transferring some of that raw footage so they could use it to build some more content out of that. But I think it's exactly what you said, like that allows you to really have some back and forth and to share some things that you can then use for other things like repurposing. We're going to talk about how much I'm a big believer in repurposing in just a minute. But yeah, so I want to talk for a few minutes, Bob, about these 5 tips that you talked to me about that are kind of I have some tips I want to share around promotions, but around just the production of the video and creating the content.
So yeah, so this is like the 5 kind of takeaway tips that are a little different than all the other things, but and they're all C's. I like the little themes of things. So really, communicate. Again, that kind of goes back to really communicating with whomever you're producing this video with or for. Communicating on the front end, pre-production. Really just communicating the goals and like what do you hope the purpose of these videos are. So communication is key on the front end. I've found like the more you can communicate on the front end, the less surprises like a client's going to get when they watch the video and say, well, why did you do that? So it's really key to communicate on the front end about goals and shot lists maybe, and just things like that. And so clarity to me, just jumping down, because I know probably time is a thing. So I'm just going to jump down and then you can jump in. So I think clarity is just also creating like a storyline. It's just not confusing. When you're creating a video, just being clear about your messaging throughout. You don't want to lose people halfway through a video. Like, why are they going down this rabbit hole? Just being, again, it just goes back to that intention of why are you producing this video? And going down the list to connect, I also feel like, to me, connection is about when you're producing a video for somebody. I'm just assuming that because as a video creator, for me, I'm rarely on camera. That's why it's mortifying for me to be in front of the camera talking, because I'm usually behind the camera. So for me, when I'm connecting with my subject on camera, is to really, when you're in that interview, assuming it's an interview, to just really kind of follow their cues. I mean, you can sort of see where an interview is going to go based on how they light up when you ask them a question, or maybe there's something that is just that hits them, and then just digging into that a little deeper and just going into that why, like just really connecting with who you're talking to on camera. That to me is just found, I get the best interviews when you can have that connection and not just being a button pusher. It's really caring. This is like one of the final ones, but again, creating, fail, create. To me, that's just, we just talked about it earlier, test out things, try new things when you're producing video. Don't be afraid to screw up. If you create a video for yourself and no one's ever going to see it because it's never going to see the light of day online, try new things, have fun with it. It should be about fun and not just work all the time. And then caring, just like I said, really care about what you're doing. I feel so fortunate that this is my job where I get to make videos of people and places and things. And I really care about when I'm working with these people that I want them to be proud of what I produce for them and like make a really an impact in what they, what the goals are for them, and just really, making that, having that care and just making those little details in the edit, and just maybe finding the right soundtrack that goes along with it, just really doing all the intentional things that are going to make an impact, and instead of just mailing it in, so.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think, it's funny, I gave you a shout out in the chat, Bob, because for those of you who joined later, you might have missed the video that Bob did for our DIY tourism marketing conference. But, I feel like where you really shine in this space is in that first step of communication. I feel like you really put so much investment into that conversation with the client or the person that you're representing, that then that communication leads to the clarity, the connection, creating and caring. Like, it makes all of that stuff make more sense. And I think, like, again, the proof is in the pudding, right? So for me, when I showed the video that you did for us a couple weeks ago to some folks, what I told them was my favorite part is that when I watched it, I almost cried over what I said at the end, right? Like, I loved the whole video, but it was like you captured something that I feel about the conference that I produce so deeply that for the video to end with that as like a statement, it like really just made me so proud of that event. Right. And I think, like I said, I really give you a lot of credit that that's not just because of the work I do on the event. That's because you really talked to me. You really came to the event and got to meet a lot of our people, got to have the experience. So when you made those creative choices at the end, it was just like, it really was on target. And I think that's why like that communicate piece is so important as like that like main tip that kicks off everything else.
Yeah, and to me, just that care that, I mean, I shot weddings for a long time. I started that in 2009. I shot weddings for like 13 years. And I really feel like when you are a videographer at a wedding, you have to care about the couple and you have to care about their story and why they love each other and all that. And to me, it just really sharpened my skill of storytelling and all of that, just because it is like a highly emotional day for people. And I think that I just, without thinking about it, just transfer that same sort of care for like corporate clients or destinations or people like that, or just whoever I'm working with. So just really just having that empathy and, knowing that they're paying you money to put this together and you really want to be invested in it just as much as they are, hopefully,
Yeah.
that they're invested in it. So
Susie has a great question about music. She was saying, I've always been nervous about adding music to YouTube. How are people using popular music in their videos? I have tracks in mind that would be perfect, but I can't figure out how to use them properly. So again, I'm really glad I have an expert on today's call, because my answer to that is, if we're talking about promotions for our businesses and our organizations, we have to be very careful, because we can't just use popular music. It's the difference between personal and commercial use. And so that's why on Instagram, when I'm making reels on my personal account, I can put Beyonce on there, I can put Rihanna on there, I can put anybody I want, right? But as soon as I have a business account and I'm creating reels, I don't have access to that popular music. And that's because as soon as I'm talking about promoting my business, I'm doing commercial use. And so, Susie, I don't know if you want to clarify in the chat if that's like what you're talking about, which is using popular sort of trending music. But I do think there's limitations right out the gate if you're using it for business versus personal purposes. What about you, Bob? I think you're probably more knowledgeable about the actual legality of this than I
yeah,
am.
there's this pesky little thing called copyright. And obviously, yeah, I mean, I learned this the hard way, again, shooting videos for or doing the wedding stuff. Because before, I'll be like, okay, we'll use Ed Sheeran because you love that song. It was your first dance. You can't really do that as a professional video person, especially if you're producing something that's going to be on YouTube or things like that. I mean, I think they've gotten a lot more lenient, like you said, for like social media, for like personal accounts, where they actually encourage to have Beyonce and the trending audio for things like that. But if you're a professional producer, unless you have the rights to use that music, it's pretty much an off limits thing. And the best way I've told people about music is like, think of it as more of like a score, and just think of it as it helps support what's going on camera, and like maybe it helps that emotion and like finding the right music that fits. And just one pro tip for me, for anyone that's producing video that uses music a lot, as you're culling your audio, listen to music, listen to your music libraries that you have the rights to use, be listening to music all the time, make playlists of these, tracks that you can use. And like, to me, I found the best music when I'm sitting like hours deep into like culling through audio, through video. And I'm like, okay, that's a cool track. And maybe it's not for this project, but I'll put it in a playlist for something else. But always listening to music, that really helps to me, is a little pro tip to help for finding music for projects.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out another pro tip, especially for those of us using business accounts on social media. When you're inside of Reels or even inside of other programs where you have the stock music to choose from, I often tell people to make sure you identify some type of genre, also for your brand. Like, what is kind of the feel of the brand? What kind of, vibe are you trying to create? There might even be more than one. But I think it's really important sometimes not to just be all over the place with your music choices, but
Yeah.
to like be thoughtful and have intention. And Keely,
Yeah.
to your question, where's the best place to find music? I know I can't remember off the top of my head. So Keely, I'll put my email in the chat. If you remind me, I'll send you the stock music company that I work with, because I do educational videos and sometimes I like to have music at the beginning or the end. And so I've just purchased some really cool like stock stuff. But do you have a recommendation, Bob, for where you're getting music of different kinds?
Yeah, there's a lot now. I mean, before there would be a lot of, pay per track kind of services out there, and I still think there are, but for now, I mean, to me, the most cost effective way of doing it is just, again, a subscription based library. There's a few that come to my mind are like Soundstripe, Artlist, MusicBed. There's a lot of them out there now, and you just really, if you just wanted to just poke around in some of those sites, I think you can listen to kind of get the vibe of those. And, you can search by keywords. And I think even some of those you can actually search with some AI prompts where you can give an AI prompt about what kind of music you're looking for, maybe the kind of video you're producing, and like it'll spit out some options based on that. So that's another way that kind of AI is changing the game of video. So that's a whole other subject.
Yeah. And Susie was asking one more question. Do you know, so let's say she found like a track on Spotify that she really liked. Is there a way for her to find out about the licensing in one place, or does she have to reach out to like that musician and try to contact them?
I know there's sites out there where you can actually find commercial music and license it that way. I mean, keep in mind, if you're doing something, whether you're contacting that artist directly or you're going through their publisher or their record label or whatever, it's going to cost you a lot more to use that. And that's probably something you'd want to build into your cost too. I mean, those could run into the thousands of dollars for, to use tracks like that. And, just depending on what the budgets are for your videos, I mean, that's just something to consider. So.
Yeah. And then Cirilla was asking in the chat, does anyone use CapCut for social media videos? They have some music libraries too. Not sure if approved, but assume they include copyright. And so my understanding with CapCut, Cirilla, is it's very similar to just Instagram in general. So like if there's music available, like when I'm in my business account in Instagram, the music options available to me are open for me to use. I don't have to worry about making mistakes because they wouldn't be in there. It's like the musicians had to allow their music to be listed and available to me. So I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but I would assume CapCut is the same since so many people are using it. And there's other types of social media tools where they have, again, stock music available. And that is all stuff where they have already worked out with the creators of that music for that music to be available. And Kathy, yeah, I can basically actually work on putting together a list of Bob and I's music recommendations. When we send the recording, I'll include that in the page. But I think it's important for Susie's question. You can't just go to Spotify and like take what you want. You know what I'm saying? Same like you can't just Google people's music. You can't just go to YouTube and kind of take things. And it would even be hard to extract those MP3s in the first place from those platforms. So you do have to find out where that person is licensed and connect with them. That's what I've done in the past with local musicians, is I've actually reached out to them directly, right? So as we're wrapping up, I wanted to share some of my tips, and you guys know I am a teacher, so I always make my slides really in depth. So you have some homework to do later. You can dig into the content, but I just wanted to go over some of the top things that for getting your videos out in front of more people, right? So I think first, if you've been doing video in the past, go back and look at your insights and analytics. What's been working, what's not been working, right? So if you're using social media, if you've got video on YouTube or your website, look at what is actually getting more views, getting more engagement. And then I think it's really important to think about what your customers and clients want and need. So there's some video, like the video that Bob produced for me, or the one that he produced for Cirilla when her brand was just getting started, right? So to me, those might be a little longer form. They might be a little broader. But then when I'm working in social media and on my website and in other types of content marketing, I'm producing a bunch of different videos. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're very, very specific. So I really want to be thinking about the customers. What do they need from me from video, right? How can I serve them? How can I help them? How can I entertain them? I want to make those things really core when it comes to my promotional strategy. The first pro tip I want to give you is post your videos natively to your channels. And so to me, if you have an MP4 file or a MOV file, and you have multiple social media channels and you have a YouTube and you can put things on your website, take that file and upload it everywhere that you can. Native content typically does better in algorithms The only exception to this rule is if you are really focused on building your YouTube channel, share the YouTube link, because every time somebody watches the YouTube video, it counts as a view on your YouTube channel, right? It actually counts as a view on that video, even when it's embedded. And so if YouTube is really my primary platform, I might actually decide to put everything on YouTube and then share the links and drive a lot more viewership for my YouTube channel, right? But overall, I think a lot of us that are businesses and organizations, we have multiple channels where we want to do well, and uploading your video natively is really valuable. The second thing is take a multimedia approach to video. So I love that, Bob, you were really encouraging people to experiment, try things, then be like, ew, that was terrible, I'm not doing that again, right? And then do something else. Like, don't limit yourself, because there's going to be all these different places across the web and in your marketing and communications, sometimes even both internally and externally, where video is going to be valuable. So long and short form really matters. And I think playing around with different things can be really valuable to see what gets the best response, right? So doing a longer form, like 2-minute video on something, doing a, 15 or 30-second short or reel on something, and even considering what live stream could do for you, right? So taking like not just multimedia overall, but within the video context, right? Like, what kinds of different ways can you do things? And I did want to give a shout out. Yesterday, I was taking some of my 1-hour webinars, and I was asking this AI tool that I've been testing, Visor.ai, to create clips for me from my 1-hour pieces of content. And anyway, I'm not going to reveal what came out of it, but it was pretty sweet. And I used the free version. I think the paid version is probably much better. And it's not like magic, right? I still had to review the shorts that it created. I had to edit some of them. I had to decide which ones were good and which ones weren't. But I think going forward, we're going to see having this approach inside of our own creative content is going to be super helpful. Also, look at videos that are already ranking high, right? So if you are covering different topic areas in an industry or a different region, watch what other people are doing. Watch what videos are getting lots of engagement, right? I think that's important, because when you decide to create your content, if your goal is to get this content to go far, you really want to see what's at the top, because if you can't make a better video than what's at the top, you're never going to move that video out of the way, right? So if some competitor has got a bigger budget and a lot more money, and they're already covering certain topics or certain issues, then you might not be able to really compete in that space if you're kind of DIYing it in the beginning, right? But that doesn't mean there's not other opportunities, right? There's other unique tips, stories, perspectives, angles that you can go after. So really just like taking a little bit of time to pay attention to who's talking about your destination, who's talking about your industry, who's talking about your types of products and how are they using video, and what's really winning, right? And then how do you match your strategy so that you're not just competing against something that's going to be really difficult to compete against. Titles and descriptions. I feel like this one thing, if you took one thing away from me today, don't just have the name of the file of your video as the title, and don't skip the description. Genuinely put into the titles and descriptions, no matter where you're posting your video, whether it's social media, YouTube, something else where you upload the video, Vimeo, have a good title and description, be clear with people what the content is about. It's so valuable in helping people find the video that are looking for things that you need. And then most of all, as Bob said, I think, have a good time. You really want to be consistent with video. You want to create things over time that are really connecting with people. So build your own curiosity. Don't be afraid to fail. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be out there, and you do have to be consistent in some way. And I think to stay consistent and to get better and better at video, if you're having fun, it's going to be a lot easier to accomplish those goals. Right. And I also just want to give Bob a shout out that some of the stuff he's really shared today, if you're going to work with somebody like Bob, I think a lot of what he explained to you is going to help you talk to a pro in a much more powerful way. Right. So that you end up with a video that gets you super, super excited. So I know we're right at the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to give a big shout out to Bob for joining me today and sharing his expertise. Like I said, I will send the recording along with the slide deck, and I will include some of that list of great music options that Bob shared in the chat. But like I said, here at JB Media, we always say you do amazing things. More people should know. I think video can be a huge part of how you connect with more people in the future. So thank you all so much for the great questions. And I hope that I will see you next month on May 1st for our next digital drop-in, which will be about Google Grants. But again, thanks so much for being here, Bob.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everybody for listening and staying on to this point as well. And if you guys have a question for me, feel free to send me an email, bob@mountainwaterfilms.com. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have. So thanks again.
And I'm just going to pop your email into the chat, Bob. But also, again, when you get that page, it'll have some resources. It'll have Bob and I's information. So feel free to reach out to us anytime. But thank you all again, and I hope to see you next month. Have a great day.
Thanks.